Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/security-webinars. Closed captions in several languages are available during the live broadcast, and you can enable them by clicking on the CC button located at the lower right corner of your screen. Feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the live event Q&A by clicking on the Ask Question button. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. However, if you prefer, you can post your question anonymously by checking on the box right below where you enter it. Now, we love to hear your feedback on how we can improve on these webinars, and you can do so at aka.ms/security-webinar-feedback. And by the way, all the links that I'm announcing have been already shared with you on the chat that is on the live event Q&A window. I would also like to invite you to join our public community by visiting us at aka.ms/security community. That's the best way to ensure that you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, which, by the way, you can sign up at aka.ms/security-prp. You can request features, give feedback, review our product roadmaps, register for events, or just simply join webinars like this. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So we hope you'll join us. Today we have special guests, Jaimon Thomas and Adrian Bisaz, both with our partner called CyberProof. They will be providing an overview of their company, challenges and solutions around the migration from on-premise to cloud-native hybrid SOC. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to them. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
So, hi everybody, and thanks for the introduction. My name is Adrian Bisaz. I manage the sales aspect of CyberProof. CyberProof, for the people that don't know us, we are what we would call an emerging and new managed security service provider, where we provide and manage SOC services for our customers. We'll tell you a little bit on how we actually do this and what sort of capabilities we provide. But the message today, or the discussion today, is mostly about explaining how we have migrated a number of our customers from what they do on-prem into a cloud-native environment, and the challenges that might have been related to that, and how we actually solve those challenges. With me is Jaimon Thomas, who heads our solution and architecture team, and he's going to give you the details on some of those aspects of implementations that we've done. So let's move into the topic. As far as the agenda is concerned, we'll walk you through some of the benefits that customers have been able to achieve with migrating into this cloud-native environment. We show you some of the requirements that they had when they started to engage with us, what some of those challenges were from both the aspect of getting information into an environment and getting information out of the environment. And then we'll walk you through the solution that we've built for many of our customers and what sort of benefits that they were able to achieve. So in the times of Elon Musk, who wants to send us all to Mars and do the discussions about cloud and migrating to the cloud, we figured like a little joke might help you get into the mood. So yes, cloud is a big topic with a lot of customers. It creates challenges for many customers in changing their model of operation and changing their model of how to monitor and secure that environment. And part of those challenges is part of the role that we provide and that we help our customers. And we'll talk to you a little bit more about that. We will be very pragmatic and show you what actually has been able to be achieved with some of our customers. because ultimately it's only by pointing to real live events and real life implementations that all of this makes sense. So this is an example of one of our customers. It's a very large company, insurance company based out of France, has a presence in over 60 different countries, over 220,000 employees, and has close to about 100 different entities and subsidiaries all around the globe. And they came to us with certain challenges that they wanted to solve. One was having the ability to deliver services on a global scale. The aspects of data sovereignty was really important to them, and was also given by many of their companies that needed to make sure that their data stays within their control. Their environment became more and more complex, their infrastructure more and more intertwined. And they had lots of black spots as far as monitoring was concerned. And so they came to us to try to figure out how to bring all of this together and how to leverage the cloud as being the part of aggregation. So this is one of the largest on-premise to cloud migrations that we have done. And we've done this with our partner Microsoft together. We were able to demonstrate that we can cover more than 90% of the cloud monitoring sources. So something that was completely blind, or they were completely blind to the abilities to actually understand what's going on, we were able to achieve a very high percentage of visibility. At the same time, we were able to reduce dramatically their operating costs. The cloud provides a lot of benefits when it comes to scalability and to reduction of operational costs, and we were able to transfer those advantages to that customer. The customer is able to gain 10 to 20% year-on-year operational efficiency by going into a model that was much more automated and much more efficient. And ultimately, what really came out as a bottom line was a strong reduction of the complexity of different platforms, but also at the same time having the ability to migrate something over time without having to actually do forklift upgrades. So this migration from a current environment, very complex environment, into something new needed to be taken care of, and we were able to help them in doing this. That customer started with close to 10 terabyte of ingestion of daily log sources into their security environment. We were able to optimize that and bring it down to 3 terabytes at this stage. And they're planning to increase now from these 3 terabytes of log ingestion into, again, up to 9 terabytes over the next 6 months, because they're adding more and more of the log sources. So quite a large environment, complex environment, and also very challenging environment. So when we approached the company on trying to understand how to best help them solve their problem, we looked at Azure Sentinel with all the capabilities that Azure Sentinel brings from the cloud point of view, with log analytics as the data lake layer. And we had to solve kind of like the two aspects. The first one was, how can we bring all the data into that environment in a cost-effective way? So how do we actually also bring in on-prem sort of data information or log sources into an environment where maybe the parsers might not exist, or where maybe some of the APIs haven't been built yet? And so that was certainly some of the first analysis and first issues that we had to solve on how to actually aggregate a lot of that data. We had to build sometimes custom connectors. Sentinel and the data and log analytics is a technology that came out about 1.5 years ago. So there's still a lot of development that was required in order to optimize this environment. And so we had to spend quite a bit of time in making sure that the information can be read in the proper way and provides the value that it needs to be provided. And on the other side, the licensing schemes for cloud-based environments are usually based on a number of gigabytes of ingestion per day. So the log ingestion becomes very quickly an important aspect to take into account from a commercial point of view. So optimizing that environment was also part of the first analysis, and making sure that you take in the right sort of information and not just aggregating all sorts of volume, but really the volume or the data that makes actually sense. From the outcome point of view, what was really important is to understand how to create use cases that are aligned to the risks of the company, to also understand what sort of use cases will provide the most value in a prioritized way. So it was a matter of creating the right sort of detection rules, creating also the right way of reacting to the detection rules. So creating playbooks that hopefully could actually be supported by automated processes or semi-automated processes in order to facilitate and augment the efficiency of the investigations. Part of the whole environment that Sentinel provides is also a very interesting place to do threat hunting. You get a tremendous amount of information as part of an aggregation of a data lake. So creating the right queries and creating the right procedures on how to do threat hunting was certainly another aspect of investigation and implementation. And last not least is certainly aggregating the right level of skill sets and the right level of people that can all work within that same environment was also quite an important aspect to take care of. So let's go and look into more details about these two different layers, the one being the aggregation layer and the one being the output. And I will hand over to my colleague Jaimon, who now will walk you through the details of this.
Thanks, Adrian. To ensure we have the right information and data to aggregate, we should start looking at all the assets that we need to protect and the threats that we need to detect and what response procedures that we need to define so that we can provide that value to the customer. So you can't really detect a threat that you don't understand and cannot define. So this is why we started with a threat-centric approach by doing a threat profiling exercise. To understand the organization's current risks, what kind of threat detection capabilities that they currently have, and what are those negative outcomes that you need to kind of look at capturing. And thereby you also map those security control gaps that you have using some of the standard frameworks like the MITRE ATT&CK framework. This also helped us to define those use cases that needs to be deployed and prioritize that use cases that provided immediate value to the customer. This also helped us to identify what are the data sources that we need to collect data from and have a very clear plan in terms of what are the ones that we need to onboard faster to give customer that quick win that they're looking for. Once the data sources are identified, it's now really important to look at what kind of information that we need to ingest into the security analytics environment. And what are the specific requirements that we need to look at? Is this data that we are ingesting required for real-time correlation, or is it for supporting compliance and reporting purposes, or is it to do some advanced activities like threat hunting? So while understanding that is what information we need to collect, it's also important to see where these data should be stored so that we can actually store and process them, covering two key things. One is the compliance and data localization requirement, and then the other is the overall cost, managing the cost. There are multiple ways to bring in data into Sentinel. You can look at different data collection methods. There are abilities that the technology provides natively, and there are also custom data collection methodologies that you can actually use to support non-standard data sources, or it could be to meet specific requirements where you have to do some data pre-processing before you bring that into the environment. And the data pre-processing is extremely important because this is how you can actually meet those compliance requirements. So this is where you can actually do the cleansing of the data. You can actually add additional tagging to those data to apply capabilities like role-based access control. This also helps you to build custom parsers or route data into the right bucket, where that is for a hot storage or a cold storage for long-term data retention, reporting, and analytics. So if you go to the next slide, so typically what organizations do is they start with log sources, okay, and they will start understanding these are the log sources I have to monitor and how I get these data into a security analytics environment. And in order to do that, what kind of integrations and technologies I need, and how am I going to kind of write some rules on top of that to provide the value. Unfortunately, that will not provide the outcome the customers are looking for, and this is what we kind of we've seen with a number of our customers. So what we look at, the outcome from that would be a lot of noise in the environment. We will not be able to prioritize based on what is the customer looking for, and we end up monitoring everything. For that may not be really providing that business context and the value that customers are looking for. And this is why when we looked at our customers, and especially this customer, we went with the top-down approach, which we will show in the next slide. So in what we did here was, we started with, what are the assets, what are the environments that we are trying to protect. So once we had a very clear understanding from the customer on what are the assets that or environment that they are trying to protect, we did a threat profiling exercise to understand what kind of attacks that they have. What are the threat actors that might be targeting those assets that they want us to protect. That helped us to define a specific set of use cases or threats that we need to be able to identify, and that also helped to look at what controls the customer currently have in place and what are the gaps that could potentially be mitigated through a monitoring solution. And we also mapped those capabilities against a framework like MITRE attack framework that gave them a very clear view of what their current detection abilities are, and also baselined their existing ability. And that was also extremely important because that helps organizations to have a clear view of what their coverage is as of now. And they will also have an ability to define a content strategy that helps them to continuously improve that capability and maturity of the cyber defense function. And as part of that, you also look at, how am I going to respond to these? And this is where one of the things that we have developed, what we call a use case factory methodology, comes into play. So it's not just about understanding and defining those threat detection rules to look at the threats, but it's also how are we going to respond to that. So there will be multiple stages where you need to do a triage. While you're doing the triage, you need to have a list of enrichment sources that you need to take feeds from, whether that is your vulnerability data that you're looking at or the threat intelligence information that actually provides more context to the security analyst to make an informed decision. You also have to look at how am I going to contain that, whether you can actually isolate a machine or block a process. And this is where some of the the digital playbooks also come into play, and you can automate that. And automation is also important in order to improve the overall response effectiveness. So all these use cases that you develop is also something that we kind of stored in a catalog for the customer, which actually meant that customer could really see what use cases that they currently have and how can they continuously improve that by adding additional use cases, increasing their coverage, and also improving existing use cases. They can validate if the current threat detection capability is really providing the value that they're looking for. Are they effective? What are the opportunities to improve that? And that's one of the things that the use case catalog provides, including providing that coverage that they look for. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see how we actually started looking at collection of the data from various sources. So Sentinel comes with a large number of out-of-the-box capabilities. You can actually have the native connectors that are available. You can pull data through APIs, for example. Sentinel also, because it's actually built on Azure Monitor, provides you the Azure monitoring agent, where you can actually install that into different servers and technologies to pull security events into Sentinel. Sentinel also support syslog and Ceph connectors as well. So if there are technologies that can actually generate syslog events, there is also option for to bring those data through that methodology. Many a times, in order to meet specific needs for customer, whether that is a custom data source or if it is requiring a specific data pre-processing, like aggregation of data, the Sentinel at this point in time does not support those kind of activities, specifically data aggregation to reduce the overall ingestion volume. Adding additional tags or enrichment as you collect the data to provide more context to that information. So this is where you could use technologies like Logstash to bring the data in. So one of the things that we did for this particular customer was we actually built a highly scalable Dockerized solution using Azure Kubernetes cluster, where we could actually bring in data from some of these technologies into Logstash through Event Hub. So once we brought that data in, we could actually do additional contextualization of that data. We could do some pre-processing that was required in order to then normalize that data before we actually send it to Sentinel. This also helped us to cleanse some of these data because that could reduce the volume, thus saving the overall cost of data ingestion. One of the advantages of this approach is also that you could route the data between different storage buckets. If you send the data straight into log analytics, the cost of ingestion per GB is high compared to sending it to a cheaper alternative like an ADX, for example, or Azure Blob Storage. So that's also one of the things that we actually implemented for the customer, where we reduced their overall ingestion cost by implementing some clever routing in order to make sure that the overall cost is actually reduced and still providing the level of efficiency and supporting those requirements that they're looking for. You could also do this using some custom connectors through what we call codeless connectors. So technologies like Logstash, Event Hub, and even PowerShell, you could use those in order to write some custom scripts, or Logstash in the case where you don't need to write any scripts. You can just actually build them in order to bring the data in to meet specific requirements that the customer have. So overall, this actually helps with optimizing the overall cost, making sure that the compliance requirements are met, and helping secure ingestion of the data into the log analytics environment. If you go to the next slide, and like I said before, so cost management is an extremely important thing. So you can, as you ingest the data into the environment, especially with the cloud environment, the cost actually increases exponentially. And this is why you could use technologies like Logstash to take the data coming in, look at each of those security events and try to understand what are the events that require to be sent to Log Analytics and Sentinel for real-time correlation, and also look at those data that you need to still keep for compliance purposes, reporting purposes, or even hunting purposes into a long-term retention storage like Data Explorer or Azure Blob Storage. So using Logstash and other scripting technology, you could extract the data and then reroute them into different buckets. And that's also something that we actually implemented effectively for the customer, so that we could, of course, reduce the overall cost, but also meet some of those compliance needs and still keep those data for long-term retention. So I'm just going to hand over back to Adrian so that he can just explain some of the overall value we could realize for customer in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Jaimon. I hope you can hear me again. Yep. So, okay. Part of the advantages and some of the challenges that we mentioned earlier also comes down to how we actually can overcome these challenges. And when you migrate from a on-prem to a cloud environment, you can't just switch this over from one day to the other. So what happens is you need to take the existing environment, keep it running for a certain period of time, and then start building up in parallel the cloud environment. And that is going to take time. And so during that transition time of going from one place to another, you need to have an environment where you can have a single view on what is going on two different environments. And that's where some of our own technology from CyberProof helps customers in giving the visibility of looking at an on-prem environment at the same time as looking on a cloud-based environment. So we call this our CyberProof Defense Center platform environment. It's a single pane of glass where we actually ingest the data from the different sources, from the on-prem and from the cloud sources, and at the same time provide an environment for collaboration. So it's a place where analysts can interact with each other on the different topics. And it's a place where the incident investigation and response can happen quite effectively. It's also a place where the analysts can look at the playbooks that are defined for the specific threats or the specific incidents that might have been identified. And it's also a starting point to do further level of threat hunting and investigations or automations for the response side. So having the ability to kind of like create a aggregation point from different sources is key when you talk about a migration and talk about a change from a standard operating on-prem environment to a cloud-based environment. The migration with the customer that we mentioned earlier is a project that took us more than 12 months. So during that time, the operation has to continue, the monitoring has to continue, and the support and threat identification has to continue. So without having a single pane of glass, this is making it a lot more complicated. And the only way we were able to achieve this is by leveraging some of these technologies that we bring to the table. Part of the roadmap or part of the journey is also giving the ability to understand how the service progresses and how the service performs. And so instead of only looking at SLAs that give you availability of services, it was very important for our customers to also receive a clear indication of the KPIs that on the one side are provided to the detection aspect, but also to the response aspect. So when we talk about KPIs, we talk about the ability to create a mean time to acknowledge a incident and an alert. Obviously, the benefit is to understand how well our analysts perform in that respect, but then also to respond. So it's the mean time to response that becomes an important aspect to monitor on a regular basis and provide also that visibility to the customer so that he can see what sort of response time we have in order to improve their workflows and also prioritize maybe certain automation processes that we're putting in place. And ultimately, one of the biggest challenges for a SOC environment is to reduce the false positive rate. So by fine-tuning the detection rules, by fine-tuning the use cases, by optimizing the ingestion of log sources, you can get the system and the technologies to reduce the false positive rates so that out of a massive amount of volume of data that needs to be analyzed, you only have to look at what really matters and what is relevant. So providing these sort of indicators are key from an operational point of view and also key from a customer to monitor a service over time and understand the sort of progress that the operation can provide. When we look at incidents KPIs, so the average time to actually close an incident becomes a relevant measure on how efficient we can deal with the incident resolution. I think an important aspect is when we engage with customers, we don't just stop at identifying an incident and then handing it over to somebody else. We actually want to be involved in the incident resolution. So being able to monitor and measure that becomes really critical and important. And also the average time for a level 1 to escalate to level 2 is something you want to monitor and understand how that evolves over time. Obviously, that helps you understand the extent that level 1 has enough context to escalate, or it helps you to fine-tune the sort of information that needs to be provided. Same thing for level 2 on how to actually respond to it and how quickly they can close certain events and incidents. And all of that is still in the process of trying to create efficiencies and over time reduce the dependencies for people to actually perform investigations and have automated processes take over. So this shows you a bit of the complexity or kind of like the setup that we have used with one of those customers we mentioned, where there was a large set of data centers that needed to be aggregated into the cloud environments. So we had this legacy SIEM environment that was an on-prem environment that needed to be run in parallel with the new Azure Sentinel environment. And you can see on this slide that there was a lot of augmentation of information that needed to be added into the SOC environment. So we needed to get threat intelligence be brought into the analyst's environment. We needed to prioritize and get vulnerability scans aggregated. So this whole layer of orchestration and enrichment of information became a very important aspect of this evolution. The other part that was important is to actually create this log collection layer that allows to bring in data sources that might not be able to be brought in from just out of the box. And I think this is where Jaimon mentioned earlier that the techniques and capabilities that we've developed that help actually normalize the data, parse the data, tag the data, and also identify the data that makes sense to be looked at from a investigation point of view. So that collection layer is something we've built specifically to overcome some of those early limitations. And we're adding that information into the data lake so that when we do research and threat hunting and investigations, the information is being seen in the same way. You can also see out of this slide this important concept of giving visibility on both the customer side, but also on the SOC side. So part of the visibility is allowing customers to participate in the incident handling process to, as I mentioned earlier, verify the KPIs and understand what's going on. And having this very close collaboration between teams that might be sitting on completely different places in the world is really important to gain the level of efficiency and have the ability to sometimes go further into the investigation or having the ability to respond in a much more streamlined way. So you can see this platform that we provide allows customers to participate in the incident resolution. We can interact and interface to existing incident workflow management systems in a way that processes that might already exist in customers' environment can actually be leveraged, and other entities and environments can actually take advantage of the escalation process of the different incidents. I don't know, Jaimon, do you have anything else I missed here that you might want to add as part of this reference architecture?
No, I think you've probably covered everything, Adrian. So.
Yeah, maybe one aspect that I did not mention is this is the use case factory that Jaimon brought up earlier. Obviously, the use case factory, when you want to bring this in as a repetitive capability that can adjust to many of the changes and to many of the new requirements for new attack vectors, it needs to be brought in from both the definition of the threat detection rules, but also on the definition on how to react to those. So when we create the use cases, we really try to take into account both the aspects of information provided from the outside via threat intelligence or from information that's being brought from the inside via the SOC operations, and then create a agile process to create use cases, leverage use cases from a large sector of customers, and make sure that synergies and economies of scale can be applied in the continuous improvement process for the protection aspect. So I think that's about it from the reference architecture. Again, I think what might make sense to use as a summary slide, some of those benefits that can be achieved when we go from a on-prem environment to such a cloud environment. I think I brought it up already earlier. It's obviously giving that visibility into the cloud monitoring, having the ability to understand to what extent cloud services are part of the threat landscape as well. Reducing the cost, again, going onto the cloud, it gives you a lot more flexibility. It gives you the ability to scale up and down depending on requirements. And so having that advantage is just huge when it comes to an operation that continuously requires more and more resources. But if you don't do it right, you won't be able to get the efficiency gains that are important, because you just add another layer of cost. So having that integration capability is key. And aiming at a reduction over time is also an important aspect to bring to the table. Ultimately, cost is related to complexity, so the more you can streamline and aggregate platforms, the more you can reduce those complexity levels and reduce your costs. And ultimately, the data is only going to go up. The number of log sources that need to be analyzed is only going to go up. So you have to find a way to optimize the ingestion so that you don't spend so much money that the return can't be justified anymore. So that's about it. We went through a little bit faster than we initially planned, so I think we have some time for questions, and also to point you to some information if you want to learn more about the details, where you can get to our website, cyberproof.com, and you can find a lot of the Azure security related blogs that are part of this whole journey on how to migrate into the cloud.
Well, great. Thank you, Adrian and Jaimon. I know the team here has been answering the questions, but I just wanted to see if there's anything they would like to verbalize, Benjamin or Jaimon, to the audience here.
I think we've covered all the questions that we had in the chat there. I don't think there is anything outstanding.
Yeah, I got Ben here. So one thing I will say is that, as you can see on the screen at the moment, we've got a webinar coming up on the 23rd of June. So if you go to our website, you'll see a link where you can register for that, or if you want to go to brighttalk.com, you can find it there, or simply just email us if you want a direct link to join that. There we'll actually talk a lot more in depth about some of these questions that you're asking as well. So that'll be another opportunity to hopefully answer some of those questions. We'll actually be producing an ebook that goes into much more depth into some of the technical aspects around your questions as well. So yeah, please sign up for the distribution list, and you'll be getting all that information.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for this presentation. And while we have you on the line, I just wanted to remind the listeners that, you know, the best way to ensure that you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements, to please visit us on our landing page at aka.ms/security-community. And this is not the page just simply for the announcements or webinar communications. You can see that while you're there, you'll find easy ways to navigate and find the resources and learning content relevant to our security products and their communities. I suggest a good start would be by browsing our bit-size product videos, the Ninja trainings we have out there, recordings obviously of the past webinars, and this is exactly where this webinar will land. And there's also GitHub communities and more. Also, just to remind you that we'd love to hear your feedback on how we can improve on these webinars, and please take a minute submitting your webinar feedback at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. And in case we missed to answer your question, as Ben mentioned, please contact him directly or one of the presenters, as on this slide they have their contacts. They'll be happy to answer additional questions. Thank you all for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.